Heartily welcome back to our newest episode of Ask the Founder, the assignment. Today we have the payment provider in the view. Perhaps you can tell us something about what's the role of the payment provider within the future multiverse, and why does this partner make it easier for users and providers to do business in the future multiverse? Thanks for being here.
Great question. Thank you so much. So I'll directly start onto this point. So for example, many platforms that name themselves Metaverse, for example, have so far, when you look at it, been mainly focused on what is so-called the Web3, and where they have, as from this specific, let's say Web3, they have been very focused on blockchain-based transactions. So transactions from a wallet to wallet, or communities coming together in a, let's say, 3D environment, what not necessarily was decentralized, but a 3D environment, not naming any specific platforms now, but the focus was mainly on, let's say, blockchain-based transactions. People coming together to exchange blockchain-based currencies, for example. But on our platform, first of all, we're not talking about Web3 anymore. We're actually talking about Web4, or actually Web5, what means not only focus on, for example, one layer of all the technologies we're using, which is blockchain, but AI integrated into a 3D VR, fully functional, AI-driven, AI-supported environment, which is fully functional, interactive, and decentralized, truly decentralized. This is Web4, and as the next stage, actually Web5. On our platform, for example, because it's not only focusing on blockchain, users can also use fiat currencies, means conventional, let's say, state currencies. They can make payments from their debit card, from their Visa, MasterCard. They can pay with Apple Pay, with Google Pay. They can make payments from basically all the most, let's say, provided payment methods that they are already used to. And if they already have a blockchain-based wallet, then they can also use their cryptocurrencies if they want to, if they choose to make payments.
It's not necessary to have a
wallet.
Not
necessary. It's not mandatory. So everyone who is still used to how they made transactions before the blockchain was basically well known, they can still do that. They are not forced to use cryptocurrencies. So that everyone, that it's basically easily adaptable for anyone, for any individual, any company, or even any government using their own state currencies. And also there's a KYC and KYB provider integrated. So simply anyone has to do a verification when they basically create an account. And then this KYC and KYB is shared automatically with the payment processor that is integrated. So there's several platforms where you do an initial KYC and KYB already to use a certain application, and then to make payments, for example, you have to do an additional KYC and KYB again, although that is not needed. So we have solved it in a way. There's one KYC, KYB that the user is doing that is automatically shared with the payment processor. And then the buyer can choose between fiat and cryptocurrencies. And then what the job is of the payment processor specifically is to allow the buyer to choose whatever currency they basically want from fiat and cryptocurrencies, for most supported. And we're also going to, let's say, add several more payment processors to create even more options and opportunities for buyers to make the process even more smooth. But we're going to start with the providers that are already offering basically the biggest scope for the beginning. But then the job of the payment processor is to allow fiat and cryptocurrency payments, and to handle an exchange automatically in the process of the transaction, to exchange the paid with currency to, let's say, the currency that the seller chose to receive, what also could be either fiat currencies or cryptocurrency, so that the seller can say in the process of when they list a certain product, service, project, or asset, they can choose, I want to be paid when a client buys my product or my offering to my US dollar account, and then they can provide basically their bank account basically to this payment processor in this already listing process. If they want to have their payment received in a specific currency to a specific wallet, if they want to receive, for example, Bitcoin, they of course have to provide a wallet which is capable of receiving Bitcoin. So you cannot provide, for example, MetaMask wallet, which is providing, let's say, Solidity code-based currencies such as Ethereum, Polygon, Binance Chain, etc., and others. You have to, which is not able to receive Bitcoin. So the seller has to provide the equivalent wallet to the currency that they want to receive, and it has to be supported by the payment processor. And then basically also in this process, the payment processor, this is why it was a bit challenging in the process to actually make that happen in the exact way we wanted to. Then also in this process, we as a platform still receive our fee, and also the intermediary commissions, which then we are redistributing. One to, of course, the intermediaries who made the introductions basically between the buyer and the seller, but also, let's say, those fees and the part that is basically redistributed to everyone who owns the participation NFTs, so which we are paying out on a regular basis through the different pools that we have. So to get that, let's say, completely smoothly done so that the end clients don't have to create an account where they have to do a deposit first and then a withdrawal again, because we don't want to be a centralized payment process. And we also don't want that for any purchases that are happening on our platform, that either a buyer or a seller, they have to, let's say, first make a deposit and give their assets out of their own hand. We don't want that. We want to empower, in fact, and also empower the education around it, that same as you hold, for example, Bitcoins on a ledger, let's say certain assets, you have the capability to manage them, own them on a certain ledger, decentralized. We want to empower that the people also learn and realize they should be the owners of their own assets. They should not give their assets out of their own hand, maybe simply because it's more convenient, like they bring their money maybe to the bank in euro or in US dollar, but this is always also risk involved if you give your money out of your own hands. But we want to empower basically the real decentralization of assets, but also of, as an expert, of their own data. But it's another topic. So
yes,
in a nutshell.
That's another part. But like you say, it's very important for everyone to take responsibility for his own assets. And our responsibility as a Future Multiverse is to find the best partners, the securest partners, so that we can be very sure that everything will work fine out. And now that I learned as well, it's very good to have the best partners because they can offer these bridge between crypto and fiat, and you do not need an own wallet. You can say, okay, I do the same that I did before. I do not have to learn anything else. To give a practical example, if one of our VIP members want to rent their land, then they can tell everyone, okay, you have to pay with euros. Yeah, I only accept euros. And you have a buyer or someone who wants to rent or lease your land, and he comes from another country. He says, okay, I only have USD, or I only have renminbi, or some other currencies, or I want to pay with Bitcoin. That's no problem. You say, I want euro, and the buyer comes and says, okay, I pay with USD. His USD go to the payment provider process, and there what's changed. This is the bridge. And I can say, okay, I have my euro. There's the change at the payment processor, and that's fine. So it's easy. Don't have to learn anything new. I don't need a wallet, and that's perfect. And it's safe as well. So security.
Exactly. And this is actually has been a big issue, in fact, for example, in the real estate industry. I've heard that so many different times that really big real estate agents, they complained and said, I lost millions of dollars because a client that I had, for example, who wanted to buy with Bitcoin for a real estate property, but the owner only wanted to receive US dollar. Buyer didn't want to have the inconvenience of, let's say, exchanging their large amount of this asset basically into another currency, paying all the fees, etc. And often the seller basically refused a buyer that wanted to pay with Bitcoin, for example. So, but in this process, the seller can simply say, I want to receive US dollar on my bank account, period. Then the agent basically has, let's say, the comfort, in fact, to use a platform where the buyer that is interested can choose any currency that is supported, of course, by the payment processor. And we make sure that especially most of the most well-known currencies are supported. The seller doesn't even know if the buyer paid with Bitcoin and still is happy because he receives the US dollar into their account. But of course, our platform, basically, processors that are integrated, of course, have to be compliant. The users have to do KYC, KYB. The payment processor is handling it in a fully compliant and serious way. And then the seller knows, okay, I receive US dollar in my account as I wanted. But also the seller knows, okay, the buyer had to do a KYC and KYB. So also it's a regulated payment processor that, of course, also does due diligence on the currencies that are used. So the seller knows, okay, it was a professional, compliant transaction and everyone's happy. But this actually has been a big challenge for also the real estate market, where many, let's say, asset owners who have cryptocurrencies often were refused actually for buying real estate, for example. And this is solved through that. And additionally, this is the great thing. It's not just the payment process that we solved now, which is now compliant with KYC and KYB. It's smooth for the seller, smooth for the buyer, and also for agents that simply can share in their referral fee, and then anything that is purchased by a potential buyer on the platform, the system automatically knows that the referral was initially done by this agent, and anything that this person then is buying, basically, there's no circumvention possible, basically. So because the system automatically knows, okay, this person was initially referred by a certain agent. Then also we as a platform receive our fee, we can redistribute that. So it's all happening in a smooth way that everyone's happy. And additionally, also what we offer is not just the payment process, but the ability for a potential real estate buyer to go from a certain place, no matter where they are in the world, within seconds into the real estate object that they potentially want to buy, can have a fully immersive experience, like they're actually there, so hyper real that it's difficult to tell the difference between reality, or the rendering is even looking more real than the physical, the usual appearance. That there's an immense convenience created for buyers who have their own assets. So, for example, they have a large amount of Bitcoin. They want to buy potentially several real estate properties in different countries, but they don't even have to travel to those different countries. And so they know that on this platform, because we're working with the according regulatory providers and law firms, basically, that can confirm that every listing that is on the platform is real, it's legit, due diligence has been made. So someone who has, for example, Bitcoin, no matter where they are in the world, for example, Asia, they can now travel to the USA without even having to travel physically, and can make a purchase with their currency in a secure, compliant, smooth way where everyone's happy, and without even having to travel in a most secure way. So this is the foundation that we have now created for really making this platform fully tangible for the real world economy, and fully scalable and usable even for entire governments, for entire countries, as an example.
So it's not only about the payment provider where we solved new things, where we solve problems that have been existing in other multiverses, metaverses. So we have many, many other things that are unique in the future multiverse. You mentioned this, to change places between here and there within seconds. So we will do another episode about that, the many opportunities and possibilities that Future Multiverse offers. For now, we can mention the payment provider is a big thing within the Future Multiverse, and Future Multiverse is here to provide you with everything you need and to make the world a better place. And I hope you follow us in the next episode as well. For now, payment provider is solved, and thank you very much for your time, dear Simon. See you next.
Thank you so much, Stefan, for the interview. Excellent. Perfect.